Hi, Andre. Welcome back to Real Vision. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm excited to talk about your music career, your experience in crypto, and the way forward with music NFTs and everything that you're pioneering in the space. Thank you for taking the time today.
No, of course. I'm stoked to be back actually. Yeah, I've been a long time viewer, and I'm just glad to be a part of this.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. Why don't we remind the Real Vision audience of who you are? Your name's Andre, but you obviously go by an artistic name as well. Many may have seen it or not. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my name's Andre Anjos, but I'm primarily known for my artist name RAC. It's been a moniker that I think of it as kind of like an umbrella that I've made music under for almost 15 years now professionally. So it's been sort of my lifelong thing. I've never really had like a real job. I've only worked on music and tech and everything sort of surrounding my career. I could get into a lot of rabbit holes here, but basically, I've been working in almost every facet of the music industry, whether that's remixing, film and TV, scores, or releasing original work, working with major labels, working with indie labels. I've kind of done a little bit of everything, and perhaps more relevant to this conversation, more recently, since 2017, I've been playing a lot with tokens on Ethereum and with smart contracts and all that fun stuff. That is kind of a broad overview. I was lucky enough in actually 2017 as well to win a Grammy, and that was an incredibly sort of validating experience. And my one quick anecdote is when I did win, my manager turned to me and said, "Is like, well, that's one for the obituary." And so that kind of a little bit morbid, but that's kind of his sense of humor, and it sort of follows you everywhere. So, that was like a really important moment in my career. But at the same time, that's also when I discovered crypto, and I kind of became far more obsessed with that side of things in recent years. So yeah, we can get into it, but basically, I've done a lot of different types of projects within the crypto space and kind of been involved for a long time now.
Awesome. But it starts with music, right? From what I've read in the multiple articles that you have out there, you're from Portugal and you used to play with cassette recorders and then mixing those as a child. I would love to hear more about that, how, that creative process, 6, 7 years old, and how's that been with you through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I was born and raised in the little country of Portugal. It's like pretty small place, like 10 million people. So I was born and raised there. My mom's American and my dad's Portuguese, so I'm like a dual citizen. I'm bilingual and all that fun stuff. And it was actually, again, this is kind of in hindsight, but I think it was due to that perhaps confusion or lack of comfort with either language that sort of led me to music. And I always felt like it was a sort of a creative outlet that wasn't so strict, and you could kind of, it was a way to sort of express yourself in a way that was a little bit looser and a little bit less you know uh, people wouldn't give me a hard time about it. So that's sort of roughly when I fell in love with music, and I felt like it was almost like a third language, like another form of communication, like an emotional form of communication. So that it's been a huge part of my life ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. I definitely relate. I'm a bilingual person myself, having grown up in Mexico and then coming to the States, and can definitely see how having the knowledge of different languages and cultures gives you a bit of an edge sometimes in understanding new technologies and new ways of looking at the world. So
Hmm.
let's dive a little bit more into your crypto experience. So you win the Grammy, your manager tells you, "Hey, yeah, remember you're gonna die one day." And how does that become, a crypto thing?
Yeah. I think there's just a little bit of context before that, which is that I have a bit of computer science background. I think that goes hand in hand when you're into music production. you're into computers, you're into the internet, you know. So I grew up building computers, and I was always savvy with that kind of stuff. So I had been following, you know, I'd basically been building computers since really the late '90s, and I've just been tinkering with that kind of stuff for a long time, and you know, I became obsessed with Napster when it came out. I became obsessed with LimeWire, with BitTorrent, and you know, BitTorrent to me was kind of a turning point because I felt like it was the first really truly decentralized system, peer-to-peer decentralized system that came up. That sort of shares a lot of principles that we sort of take for granted now in crypto, but you know, it was kind of novel at the time. And this idea of creating, you know, a decentralized service that couldn't be stopped to me was pretty cool. And I just love that idea, you know, that it's sort of a neutral technology. And you know, I became kind of obsessed with it early on, and I was pretty deeply involved in it. And you know, I had sort of heard about Bitcoin here and there. I think like many other people, and you probably saw an article about like how it's going to zero, or like something, or how it's a scam, or it's going to boil the oceans or whatever. And like so, I've been hearing about that for a long time, and I kind of, not that I was dismissive, but I was like, okay, I'll check it out someday. And I also wasn't like deeply, you know, financially motivated. That wasn't really my focus at all. So it didn't really appeal to me then until like really like late 2016, when you know, that's when I really started to do more of a deep dive. I was like, oh well, this is actually really interesting. We're taking some of those same principles of decentralization, peer to peer, but applying it to a currency. And you know, it's the mining thing was really confusing at the time, and I was like, I'm not really sure what's going on. Like, but you know, at a certain point it kind of clicked. And it was really after, again, I wasn't too interested in the currency aspect of it, but when I discovered Ethereum, and this was through, I think I watched a YouTube video of Vitalik talking about it and just explaining it. That's sort of when I had that light bulb moment where I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant, because it sort of takes that idea that we used for currency in the Bitcoin blockchain and sort of made that general purpose, and you know, you could apply it to basically anything. So that I became, you know, kind of obsessed with that. And more specifically, I became obsessed with how to use that technology to sort of change the music industry. And you know, again, for context, for those that don't know, the music industry sucks. They're awful. It's like they're they're
But they gave you a
they're
Grammy.
well, they can give me all the Grammys they want. They're still horrible. You know, it's not like you know, this is sort of the more difficult part about this, because it's not. It's almost not like a people problem. It's like an infrastructure problem.
Okay.
It's sort of a status quo. I mean, there's definitely some bad actors in there, but I think a lot of people just sort of accept the system as it is and just say, it's like, well, this is how we do things. So, you know, it's I just wasn't okay with just accepting that. And you know, I played the game for a long time, by the way, but I think after a while, I just decided that, you know, there has to be a better way. And I think that this technology could potentially enable us to rebuild the music industry in a way that's a lot more fair and equitable to artists. And you know, again, I don't want to make this talk about like the problems of the music industry, because I could go on forever. But basically, just to speak about it roughly, essentially, artists are always the last to be paid. They're always paid late or not at all, and they're always paid, I think, like in between 12% to 50% tops. So the vast majority of the income that is generated by music, which isn't very much actually, is captured by, you know, intermediaries or large corporations, and you know, people that are really more financially focused. And meanwhile, I think a lot of the artists, you know, live in this sort of quasi, you know, poverty level. You know, it's almost a cliche, like the starving artist. You know, I have to say, like, I'm actually a little bit one of the fortunate ones. Like, I've definitely been able to make a living, but you know, I'm very aware of sort of the problems that you know, really all my friends struggle with, and you know, have to deal with. So I became quite motivated to do something about it, and at least try it. And like on the it's not purely altruistic or anything like that. It's a huge opportunity also for me. So, but it was something that I felt like it was worth exploring, and I didn't see anybody else doing it. So in 2017, I just started to explore that, and we can get into that if you want, but
Yeah,
that
would
was kind
love
of
to get
my
into
my early
that.
path.
I know you launched your own token, dollar sign RAC, and then tell us a little bit more about what led you to it. Obviously, you've been exploring the space. You're seeing how decentralization of the streaming services, which is kind of funny, right? Because they were like the first disruptors of the music industry, and the industry pushed back really, really hard without realizing that. For example, for a kid like me in Mexico, I was able to
Yeah.
access music via the internet that there was no way I could even like. Well, first of all, I couldn't afford it, but second, like there was no way for
Mhm.
me to purchase it.
Mhm.
And so it was only like radio or downloaded from these services. And so they kind of missed that boat. So you come around and you say, I'm gonna launch my token. What's the thought process behind it and how's that going?
Yeah. I just want to say, like, I totally share that sentiment. Like, I was just a kid in Portugal. I would go to the record store, and first of all, I couldn't afford anything either, and it was all major label albums. Like, you couldn't even get something like Radiohead, which to me is like pretty accessible, like well known artists, but you couldn't even get that. Like, that was too obscure for the record store. So it was just this like kind of very like Napster and a lot of those early platforms. It wasn't really about stealing. It was actually about access, and
Sure.
and being able to access stuff. And I don't know if you remember at the time, but a lot of people just assumed that the record industry would work with Napster and just
Yep.
sell music that way because it makes sense. Why would you try to shut them down and fight it? And to this day, I think we still feel the effects of that. But to actually answer your question about the token, so I do want to give a little bit more context of like sort of the path to the token, because there was sort of like a lot of meandering until I got there. But like I mentioned in 2017, I'd sort of been playing around with this technology, and I reached out to this company called Udro Music, and they were really the only game in town at the time trying to do music projects on Ethereum. And I worked with them, and we actually released the first album on Ethereum in, I think, like July 2017. The whole idea was so simple. It was like smart contracts, and like basically you deposit ETH and you get a zip file with my album, and it was like a direct transaction. It was like the simplest concept ever. But I think what caught people's attention was that it's actually one of the few ways to actually have just a direct transaction, and we're talking about like no payment intermediaries, like just direct, here's the files, I'll
Artist
take the money.
to the fan. Kind of
Yeah.
like one of the
So
first iterations of that.
yeah, and I mean, truly it was more symbolic than it was like a great success or anything like that. I don't it wasn't like a huge money maker for me or anything like that. We were still selling the album at $10, in ETH.
Yeah.
But I think we had 150 or 160 sales. So it was really not like a success sales wise or anything like that. But it's interesting because I spent that entire album campaign, doing press and like talking to, journalists and whatever. And that was always like what people wanted to talk about. And so it kind of captured the attention of people, but more on a conceptual level. So, that was the first iteration. In 2017, the bubble happened, and then 2018 came along and everything crashed, and all that interest around blockchain and crypto sort of went away. And
Yep.
me and my friends sort of stayed with it because, through that process, I met a lot of developers. I met a lot of people that actually build this stuff and aren't just trading, and I feel like those are kind of my people. And I made a lot of friends, and I saw them continuing to build, and I saw so much innovation during that period where, Ether was like $88 at one point, so
Yeah. So
yeah, it
really,
was like
when
rough,
the
like
builders are
PTSD.
still there, I
So
remember thinking it was going to zero. And
Yeah,
I missed the whole first wave. And then when it didn't go to zero, and when I saw people sticking around when it had crashed 90%, and they were still building, like you mentioned, I thought to myself, well, there's got to be something special about this,
yeah,
because these are very smart people and they're still here.
right.
And that's what attracted my attention. And so you were one of them, and I cut you halfway. Sorry.
No, no,
So
no.
then
But it was crazy because, like, yeah, it's truly some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life are like, also obsessed with this problem and are actively trying to, work on it. And like, and it wasn't just in music. I mean, there was so much development on the DeFi side, like sort of infrastructure level stuff that needed to be there, for this ecosystem to flourish. And we're not even talking about NFTs yet. I mean, this is very much before all of that. So I mean, that's what kept me going. It's like these people are sticking with it, and if they, I mean, it was sort of validating to my own opinion, which is like, yes, this is incredibly valuable. We should keep building on it. And all the traders and all the YouTube channels and all the influencers, they went away. They moved on to like marijuana stocks or like something like that. And and all the like interesting, really intelligent,
the
like
nerds, I would
autistic,
call them the nerds.
like mathematician types,
Yeah.
stayed and like kept building. And so that was like, okay, I'm going to stick with this. And I started playing with DeFi. I kind of explored a bunch of different projects during that time, and it kind of culminated in a couple years later in 2020, where I felt like the time was right. I worked on an album in that period, so I was ready for another album, but I didn't want to just do the same thing. So, I had put out this, the album in 2017. Now I had a new one, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the same thing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create essentially like a cassette tape. So, I typically I release stuff, on vinyl and CD, and if people want a physical product. But I was like, you know what, I should do a cassette tape. Why not? It'll be fun. But this time we're going to do something a little different, which we're going to only create 100 copies. So there's only 100 of them that will ever exist, and we didn't even do like test cassettes. Like we just went, there's only 100. That's it. And we basically, instead of selling them for a fixed price, we let a market determine that value. So something really interesting happened, which was essentially was a Uniswap pool for those that are into this. Like it was basically just like a market that was traded freely. And my goal with that was to challenge the notion that music has a fixed value, or that it has like this, that it's worth 0.00000 per stream or whatever, whatever Spotify decided. My goal was to prove that music has way more value than what we're currently valuing it as. So, and like, just for context, like what happened was on the first day, it went from $20, which is the starting price, which is already kind of expensive for a cassette tape. It went from 20 to I think like $1,300 or something like that, and then it fluctuated. It eventually hit a peak of $13,000, and it became the most expensive cassette tape of all time. So it was wild. We beat Prince by like 4 or 5 grand. I don't know. It was crazy, but again, it wasn't really about the amount. It was more about proving that this thing that we do, that musicians and the artists do, has way more value than what the incumbent system is pricing it as, which I think is sort of one of the major issues that we have in the music industry, is how we value artist catalogs and stuff like that. We can get into that if you want. But so I felt like that was successful. And so in this time, it's COVID, people are inside. I think crypto started to kind of take off a little bit more, and it was around COVID, where live performance just went out the window. It completely stopped. So it you know it basically, like, what the main source of income for a lot of people, I had sort of kind of diversified at this point, so I wasn't like so reliant on it, but it was a kind of a big blow, to not be able to tour. And I realized like how reliant we are on live performance, which is a very fragile thing, actually, if you think about it. The amount of things that can go
Yeah.
wrong.
Besides musicians, right? I've met actually a lot of visual artists now in the NFT space, having a lot of success, um, who lost a lot of their income because they would be designing, the background sets or helping out with everything from the posters to the
Mhm.
tickets. And so, yeah, they definitely, beyond the musicians who also suffered, I think it was very widespread across the whole artist community.
Yeah, and it was very it was very eye-opening that we are over relying on live performance as a source of income. I think people are willing to look the other way because they were like, okay, well, we won't make any money on Spotify. Well, at least we have live performance. But when that went away, I think a lot of artists were sort of surprised by that and didn't know what to do. So again, this is all, I'm getting to the token, I swear.
No,
But
you're good. We're
basically,
loving this. We're loving this.
this context is really important. So okay, so like I'm in COVID. What do I do? The first thing that I did was launch a Patreon, a subscription model. So okay, I'm gonna try that, see what happens. I had a fairly large fan base, but I had never really tried to monetize it in that way to basically like sort of engage with my more super fans, if you want. So I got into that, and I started Patreon, and I started streaming on Twitch, and I was doing essentially like 3 sets a week, like 3 to 4 hours at a time. It was a lot. Like I was streaming a lot, and my channel was blowing up, and like I had all this crazy stuff happening, and what. But the thing that was really surprising to me that happened was a community started to emerge, and I didn't plan for this. This is something that kind of just happened naturally, where like I had people in my Twitch, I had people in my Patreon, and now I'm sort of funneling them into my Discord server, where I think the most powerful thing that happened was it wasn't that I was talking to them and they could talk to me. It was that they were talking to each other,
Okay.
and that was something that really doesn't happen on other social media platforms. Like maybe even on Instagram, if I post a photo, like people will comment on it, but it's almost like commenting at me,
To you.
and I'll reply, but they're not talking to each other. So it's a very different idea, with Discord, where people are actively talking to each other, and that community started to form, which I thought was like sort of an amazing thing, and I just tried to sort of enable it and help it out. And I think what I realized is that I was perhaps maybe a catalyst for people to come together. Maybe I was that first reason, they like my music or whatever. But it turns out they have a lot more in common than just me. So I thought that was like such a cool thing. And again, this is all pre-token. This is all just happening
This is
already.
great. This is great because I
Yeah.
definitely have some questions even before we get to the token on some of the things you've shared so far,
Yeah.
and starting to tie it into the world of NFTs, where a couple of things stood out. You mentioned, artists don't really have a way of correctly assessing the value of their work, and you see it in music, you see it in other types of art, and it's something that later on we'll touch on how NFTs have changed that a little bit and started to change the narrative around it. And then you mentioned community, which is one of the biggest drivers of the NFT adoption, finding your tribe, finding your group of people. So it sounds to me like as you go through time in your experience as an artist, you definitely explored naturally and through just curiosity and sometimes even necessity different ways of finding a way to capture that value in your community to continue furthering your art and your career. And so that then takes us to the next question, which is what came after that.
Yeah, it's so true. Like just real quick, I've spent my entire career building communities for other platforms. I've been building communities for Facebook. I've been building communities for SoundCloud. I've been building like on the surface it looks like it's for me, and on some level it is, but really all the value is being captured by the platform itself. you
Right.
know when I build an audience on Instagram, Instagram is making the money. I literally have to pay them to boost my posts to reach the audience that I built. And that to me, um, I guess I just got tired of doing that. So okay, so in all that context, I have all this activity happening in my Discord, and I see all this activity happening in DeFi on Ethereum, like the ERC20 token is back, for after the ICO era, and I just figured, what, like, I think now's the time to create, I called it a community token. It's a social token. It's kind of a lot of things, and and I think it's going to continuously change over time as well. And I'm not exactly sure where it's going, but like it's been sort of an active experiment in that sort of community building and capturing the value of that community. So I see. So I created the RAC token, and it's an ERC20 on Ethereum. It's pretty standard. There's 10 million tokens. That's a fixed supply. I still control the vast majority of it, but the idea was essentially to bootstrap a community that already existed, that I had already built for 15 years. But how do I essentially give them the token? We essentially airdropped like a relatively small amount of the tokens to my audience, to members of my audience that have everybody that bought merch in like 2009, back to anybody that ever bought an MP3 or that bought a ticket to my shows, or that supported me on Patreon, or that bought the album on Ethereum, again, because it's public, transparent. You can go look at that. And
so for the audience that's not too familiar with blockchain and how that works,
yeah.
What's an airdrop? How do you go about it? Give us a little more detail on that.
Yeah. So, this is airdrop is sort of a term that is a bit of a crypto term that basically just means that you tokens were given to you. You didn't have to buy them. You didn't have to pay for them. They were just given to you. And the reason I approached it that way is because, like, I felt like I'm not trying to sell something to my community. I actually just want them to earn it. Like, if they contributed to the community in some way, or if they contributed to me, or this is sort of before things started, if they had contributed to me in some way, I see the financial metric as somewhat of a proxy for like how much they care about it. Why else would they
Yep.
buy merch? And we're not talking about thousands of dollars here. So it was a relatively, I think most people probably paid, over the lifetime, maybe a couple $100 at most, merch sales and stuff like that. We're not talking about like a crazy amount. So, the fact that I was able to sort of give them, all this, all these tokens, and, I'm kind of thinking of this as a form of equity in the community itself, in the fan club. It's another way to think about this. It's sort of like, it's separate, but it's kind of attached to it.
So you're taking the power of the blockchain, where wallets are public. If your fans give you their wallet addresses, you can gift them these tokens that is kind of like a membership card, right? A social token, as you imagine. And then you're able to use this to keep them engaged, to identify them. I'm assuming maybe you later used it for like part of your Discord, kind of like a more VIP area. Maybe that's a lot of artists do that. Obviously, with your DeFi background, I'm sure you have more ideas as to what comes next. But what were the initial takeaways? How did the community respond? Was there anything that really stood out that you were not expecting to hear back from them?
Well, I mean, I knew it was going to be a bit of a struggle on a technical level, to get people familiar with MetaMask and, sort of engaged with the broader crypto ecosystem. Even back in 2017 when we did that first release, I remember there was sort of this article going around. It's like 36 easy steps to get dollars into Ether, into MetaMask. So it's like, and it was like, that was sort of the moment where I realized how early we were. So my first, the first reaction was actually really great and really supportive. I think a lot of people were just like, oh, cool, all right, for free money or free tokens, whatever that means. Like, I don't know, I just want to sort of play
Free.
around with
Everybody loves
this.
free. Everybody loves free at
Yeah,
the end of
yeah,
the day.
you can't argue with free. And like, it was interesting because we gave it away for free. We didn't attribute a price to it. And then some more savvy members of the community immediately went and created a Uniswap pool, and now it trades, and that's like kind of like their thing.
Right.
So I sort of I abstained from that side of things intentionally, a little bit for legal reasons, but also just because, like, it is meant to be more of an informal social thing, less financial in nature,
Sure.
but it is traded at a price, so it's kind of interesting to sort of see how uh, you know how that played out, and like the price that came in was actually um, like kind of exceeded our I mean, I didn't even know what the expectation
Well,
was,
that's
but
good, right?
yeah. No, but it currently gives the project like a fully diluted market cap of about 30 to 40 million dollars on any given day. So it's like, it's kind of crazy to think about like a fan club being worth that much, but that is the price that it's traded at. So, who am I to judge, I guess.
Yeah, we're in Real Vision. We market is the boss here. And just again, a little bit more context for the listeners, viewers who don't know what DEX is, or a liquidity pool. What Andre was referring to is, if you have tokens, you can go to a decentralized exchange and create pretty much what is a trading pool, where you can offer to buy or sell tokens in a decentralized way. There's no order book in the middle, and so that is an even more natural market that the ones we're used to in the traditional sense. And so
Hmm.
anybody with tokens can create one of those pools and trade against it. And that's where we're getting the value of the project from. Let's move it forward a little bit more into the NFT side of the world. You're one of the
Hmm.
pioneers. As a musician into NFTs first, first kind of like on the visual side, you had a couple drops on Nifty last year. Great reception from the community, but they weren't music NFTs just
Hmm.
yet, as the market is thinking of them. So let's focus first on kind of like just the broader NFT space. How you lived through the whole 4 or 5 hype cycles that we had last year. What is the perspective of a creator that is crypto native? I would say you're very crypto native, and you see this rush, like this gold rush, coming into your space, into your art. What were your initial reactions last year?
Yeah, it was a bit surprising, I have to say, or how quickly it all happened. It's it's interesting. So, like, when I first approached the more art side of NFTs, this was a collaboration that I did with this artist named Andres Reisinger. He's somebody that I had worked on my own album art, so I sort of convinced him to join and like try some stuff out. But the approach, really, the intent there was actually because there wasn't really a music NFT format that was decided on. There wasn't a consensus there. It really just didn't exist, and even art NFTs were still, kind of. I mean, it was really not like there wasn't a whole lot happening, at least on the
Right.
level that we've grown accustomed to. So, for me, I think I was, Andres and I kind of approached this problem in a way where it's like, let's create art for the medium of NFTs. So I think of NFTs as a file format, as a medium. It's a digital format. So how do you make art that is meant to be experienced digitally, and some people put it on the screen and that's fine, whatever. But like, primarily most people are consuming this digitally, like on their phone or on a screen. So like, how do we create something like that that can sort of have the effects that you want from art, that'll people will appreciate, and then will like make them feel something, so that was kind of the intent of that originally, and where we landed was basically like a 30 to 45 second video loop with music. And the idea is to create sort of a tone and a mood, and something that loops, so you can sort of watch it indefinitely. You can kind of get stuck in it for a while, And I sort of think about my own experience in an art museum or something like that. Like, I'll go look at a piece for 30 to 45 seconds and maybe move on, or maybe stay longer if it really means something to me. So we're just trying to kind of recreate that in a digital realm. And, the reaction was really positive. We ended up breaking the record on Super Rare, one of the many NFT platforms that now exists. But we broke the record for a 70 ETH, which at the time I think was worth like 26 grand. And it's funny in the context of like where we've gone since, but at the
I,
time it was like mind blowing. It was crazy. It was like, oh my God, $26,000. This is amazing. So it was a moment for me, but also, I just realizing that this has tremendous potential. But with that said, we didn't know where all of this was going. It could have just been a moment. I think like I felt like the ideology and the reasons why we're doing it are right. And, maybe we didn't nail the format yet perfectly, or we're still trying to figure that out. And that's kind of where I think we are with music NFTs. But, it's been sort of a journey of like exploration and trying different things, see what works, see what doesn't. I feel like the days of spinning Bitcoin logos as NFTs is kind of over. You know what I mean? Like that's
hopefully, because I've never
yeah,
understood those, especially Bitcoin logos on Ethereum blockchain. So you
yeah.
said there experimentation, which is something that you've done throughout your whole life, going back to playing with cassettes as a kid, and then going into NFTs. You have this record sale, the world goes, falls in love with NFTs for whatever reason, right? There's obviously a lot of speculation and people making money, but also just the ability to unlock the creativity and the value of artists around the world.
Hmm.
And you're a musician that who makes NFTs, which is not the same as somebody who's making music NFTs. So how do you
Hmm.
see that distinction between musician NFTs and music NFTs? Because from my perspective as a collector, we had a lot of people come into the NFT space last year who maybe had a great opportunity to use the NFT technology to advance, the music industry forward, maybe in the like not the way that is democratizing just yet, but being able to reward concert attendance or reward super fans like you did with that token. And instead, we just saw a lot of people just dropping something with a spinning logo for a ton of money and never coming back, never engagement in the community. I mean, you have a Discord, you did it right. A lot of people just came and went. And that kind of gave a really bad name between the
Hmm.
collector community to musician NFTs. Um, what did you think during that whole time, maybe like March till June of last year, as like you built this great thing and you see all these people kind of like just cash grab? What was your reaction? Did you have like, did you want to change that? If so, how?
Yeah, no, I mean it was obviously disappointing to see some really low effort stuff come out, and it was even more disappointing to see it succeed. So people for their own reasons ended up buying, I think, a lot of pretty low effort, stuff. At the same time, I also started sort of a creative agency called Six, which we created that to sort of help the music industry navigate this space. And I can't tell you the amount of calls that we had with very well-known people that it was so obvious that all they saw was the dollar signs and sort of
Mhm.
missed, like you said, missed the opportunity to do something more meaningful. And I think that has soured the mood, but also soured the mood just like ICOs soured the mood of crypto. It felt like a first phase and sort of a very simplistic phase, like early on. So I don't know that that's really the right model for music, or for musician NFTs, if you want to call it that. Where there's like it's a collaboration between a visual artist and a musician. Like we saw some really low effort stuff, and like but then again, like I kind of, on some level, I don't blame them, because that's just sort of how the music industry is built, where if you're not making money on streaming, if you're not making money on touring, if you're not making money on sync or getting stuff in TV and film, if you're not making money anywhere, I mean, you got to make an income somewhere.
Right.
And I think people just looked at that as like a lifeline in the middle of COVID. So I'm also a little bit empathetic in that regard, but it's kind of what you said. I really think it's just a missed opportunity. I remember during that period we would joke around amongst our friends and say like, Nifty Gateway, one of the many platforms was sort of like it was like playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire today. So it's like every single day it was like whoever you just here's
Oh
$1 million,
yeah,
here's a
I
million
remember
dollars,
those days.
and
I got
a
bags,
lot
my
of people made
friend.
a lot of money, and so I felt like that was maybe just a first wave of it. But in the midst of that, there was a couple different teams building these interesting products, which mainly at the time, Catalog was there's really sort of two main teams as far as I see it, like in the music NFT space. And this is where we get more into what we call like pure music NFTs. So
Hmm.
that's where there's album art, but it's really just about the song. So you're selling essentially like a copy of the song that is sort of like the original or the master, if you want to think about it that way. And there's two models that are kind of emerging right now. And so one of them is Catalog, and the other is sounds.xyz. So I'll first maybe talk about Catalog. Basically, the premise behind Catalog is you're minting your discography, you're minting your albums, you're minting it's sort of like there's only a one of one, so like a single copy or a version of, or a single edition of that piece of music, and that's up to the highest bidder. I mean, so those numbers get pretty expensive. I think I actually don't know what the current record is for music NFTs. I suspect it's like 20 ETH or 25 ETH, maybe something like that. Um, don't quote me on that. I think it's that. So it's not really perhaps catering to your super fans. Unless you have like a really wealthy fan, it's a little bit more tailored towards collectors, or maybe a DAO that wants to pool money together to buy something. So it's a little bit harder for people to engage with it. I think it's a little more niche, but it can also be extremely profitable.
For the artist or for the collector?
Both really. Yeah. And then I was going to say the other sort of format that is emerging is the sound.xyz model, which is editions. So it's the same idea. You're minting the song, but instead of just one edition, it's maybe 50 or 100 or 30. And they sort of landed on a fixed price of zero point 0.1 ether. It's around $300, something like that, which is a lot more accessible to people that want to collect. And I think by and large, I think every single one of their drops has sold out and immediately sold on the secondary markets for double or triple the price. So, it's become a very hot investment, I guess, for people to quickly flip, um, if they want to. And I don't think that that's necessarily the perfect model, but it is a model that is being very successful, that is, sort of taking advantage of the speculation, but letting artists capture that speculation and the profit that comes from that, including that's another thing about NFTs that I think is amazing, is that there's a built-in uh, typically 10% royalty. So every time it gets traded, the artist gets a royalty back for that, which to me it's really unheard of anywhere else in the creative industry. So to be able to have a recurring revenue, long after the piece is sold, I think is like pretty incredible. So I would suspect that I made about 20% of my income off of music NFTs has been just from secondary sales. So if you have a secondary market that's really doing well and healthy, I mean that can be also a great source of revenue. So you can focus less on the primary sell price and really just allow trading to kind of do its thing, and you can still collect a royalty on that. Um,
I
so
want to
yeah, I
break
feel
that
like
down.
I threw out a lot, but yeah.
No, you're good. I want to break a couple of things that you said. First, the two different models that you see. I think one of the big questions that we get in the broader NFT space is IP rights. Um,
Hmm.
Within music NFTs, and just to remind the audience, when you mint something, that means you tokenize it onto a blockchain. And so you linked the metadata, so the sound, the visual, to a token that then is made minted on the blockchain. But big IP discussion, with PFP projects, with other art. What is the trend in the music NFTs right now? Are artists, obviously they're making the money, they're selling their art, their music. Do they get to keep IP rights? Do the buyers get to use them commercially? What is that landscape like right now?
Yeah, so it's the truth is that it's completely all over the place. There's really no consensus on this. A lot of people try different things. A lot of people, have so a lot of people have sold IP and and copyright through and basically using the NFT as a vehicle to sell that. There's a lot of people that have done that. Um, I personally haven't yet, uh, and there's a couple considerations, and a lot of them are more legal and a little bit dry. But basically, there's especially when you're doing additions, there's a little bit of a securities law concern, that you're issuing, a token with like 100 additions, if that could be considered security under certain circumstances. So when you attach a recurring revenue or or like when
Expectation
you're
of
selling
profit.
yeah, expectation of profit, it can get a little tricky legally. So myself and I think a lot of other people, musicians in the ecosystem, are a little bit cautious about it. But it's not because we don't want to. It's perhaps because the legality of it is still a little bit unclear. I think it's a lot safer when you're just selling a one of one, and if you want to sell the ownership of the copyright and IP itself, I think that's totally valid. I should mention that there is a platform called Royal, which was started by Justin Blau, a prominent a prominent figure in the music NFT space. But his company Royal, I think, like they believe they sort of cracked the code to do legally compliant, editioned NFTs where you do get a royalty rate. Um, but I'm a little torn on it, truthfully, because as of right now, the royalty rates for these things are so incredibly low. You know, um, the amount of money that's generated on Spotify, even on like a song that's very successful, is really not, it's just not worth that much. And it's almost like negligible. Like, do you really want to spend $60 in gas claiming $10 of royalties? So it's
Right.
like, is that worth it? I don't know. But that's like a sort of a separate issue that needs to be solved. So the landscape is really all over the place. There are people that are very explicit. It's like, I'm selling my publishing. This is, the publishing rights to this song. So that means, you can exploit it commercially if you like. So it's really all over the place. There's really no consensus. I would like to see a place where it's common to sell IP rights and copyright. I think it's important, or at least to have clarity on that. Whether that's yes or no, like just having clarity and not keep people wondering if they're going to or not. I think just being upfront and honest about it is the best course of action. The other thing I was kind of thinking is like, NFTs are it's just kind of a new format, and we're very much in the sort of early phases of this. We don't really know where it's going, and it almost feels like nobody really wants to do go in any direction, because like they don't want to give up any more rights if they don't have to. If the norm is just to um, if the norm is to just sell an NFT, then that's the norm, and they maybe don't want to give away the publishing, because that can also be exploited in other ways. So, but there's also a lot of assumptions with like artist led NFTs. in a way, a one of one NFT is sort of a promise from the artist that you won't mint that anywhere else. If I went to, if I minted on Ethereum and then went minted another copy on Solana or Tezos or whatever, that's not good for me. It's not good for the collectors, and it's not good for anybody. So it's kind of like, there's a little bit of trust involved, and so again, I personally just try to keep it open dialogue, and I'm pretty honest about this stuff.
Awesome. No, I think, give us a couple of good things there. First, it's the meme, it's cliche, but it sounds like we're still very early. Um, and then just the broader crypto space, I work in the broader crypto industry, and regulatory concerns, regulatory uncertainty. One of the big headwinds, one of the big roadblocks that we're seeing across not just NFTs, not just music NFTs, but really everywhere. So hopefully we'll get some clarity here in the future. I wanted to dive a little deeper into, you said none of the models that you've seen so far are yet perfect to what you would like. Obviously, being early and everything else that we discussed about. But if it were up to you, what would be the perfect music NFT distribution model?
Uh, that's a tricky one. I guess like I'm humble enough to say that I don't really know. There's maybe some assumptions that I can make, but the NFT format is so loose that it's like I kind of like I kind of like when an NFT has more than one purpose, and that's sort of the beauty of these programmable, assets, is that you can sort of build, utility, or people love to. It's a good buzzword for NFTs, but you can essentially add features to it later, where it unlocks certain things, or maybe that art NFT that you bought in 2020 maybe turns into like a lifetime membership at shows, or there's a lot of ways that you can sort of add to this later. And I think we're going to kind of continuously see that, where these NFTs become collectibles, but also, pieces of art, but also, it gives you access to perks and other things. And maybe that's as simple as a VIP room in Discord, or maybe that means like you go to every show that I ever do for free, So it can kind of be, I think that design space is really just like completely untapped right now. And that's something that I wanted to mention. So like I created this, so I recently sort of upgraded my token, not like technically, but like I sort of upgraded the experience around the token, where it started perhaps as uh, just like a Discord, server token, and you get into the Discord and that's all it is. But what I decided to do is create sort of a Web3 portal, so like a
Hmm.
website essentially, where you connect your wallet and suddenly you have access to unreleased music. You have all these little features. It looks like like an OS, like a Mac OS from the 90s. It's meant to look a little retro. It was really fun for me because I got to design all the like startup sounds, and when you minimize and maximize, like all these things. So but the whole idea is to really start to create a framework where you can really develop it and add more functionality and more features to these things. So where if you connect your wallet and you own one of my NFTs, I mean, you're going to get stuff that other people don't see. And to me, that's I think where I kind of want to go with my stuff, is to sort of build my own ecosystem. And the other thing I kind of glossed over a little bit was, and I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, but what we're really doing is creating a social network, on top of other social networks. So this token kind of lives at the top. It lives above Instagram. It lives above Discord. If Discord bans crypto for whatever reason, we'll just go to some other platform, and we, as the token holders, get to move. We don't need Discord to approve the removal of the token or whatever. Like, it's self custody, So I think that's really powerful, and also us gives us as a community sort of more say, because like if we can sort of go where we want to go, and we're not stuck in certain places. So what we're really creating here is a social graph, on the blockchain basically. So now I have a collection of wallets. I can look at who supported me over the years. I can see who traded, the token. I could see who sold it. I could
Paper
see.
hands.
Yeah. So it'd be kind of, it's you start to see where this can go. That's like on-chain data that you can, parse and interpret and kind of have fun with. So it's for me, it's just really interesting to design something that's not necessarily financial in nature, but it's a little more social, more cultural, and just play around with that, and because it's a different set of constraints. That's I think one of the cool things about this project versus maybe the more serious DeFi protocols is like, they're dealing with billions of dollars. Like, this is very
Hey,
small.
NFTs are doing some volume too.
Oh
I
no,
think
NFTs for
OpenSea did
sure too.
40 billion last year. But
Yeah.
just thinking about everything you're saying, it really sounds like it's taken us full circle from where your earlier comments during our chat. You were talking about the Web 2.0 social networks, where you, as a creator or as a fan, were really just adding value to them, right? To the Facebooks, to the Instagrams of the world. And now, with everything you've described, you're actually adding value to your community, to yourself, and everybody as a token holder, everybody's in the ecosystem, so that it really kind of, while it's very undefined, like you said, and it's all over the place, and there's no standards, it definitely seems like we're all going in the same direction, kind of like this ethos of Web3. And so, pretty exciting time to be able to connect with creators like yourself, and see you guys make inroads and really disrupt and get rewarded for it too. I know Rolling
Yeah.
Stone named you was top 25 future of NFTs. Is that the correct title?
It's like a future of music, or oh yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, it was kind of people that are using technology in music to sort of. I think that was sort of the point of the article, but which I obviously like appreciate so much. But you know, I didn't do this to get into Rolling Stone. You know what I mean? Like, it's a
But
nice,
it's drawing you the attention that maybe would have
yeah.
not been the case before, even though your music is really, really good. I'm personally a fan.
Hmm.
It's kind of like helping everybody kind of turn around and look at, like, there's something here, kind of like 2018, right? Like, people were still building, and then here you are building as well, kind of like carrying that legacy forward, which is, it's amazing to
Well,
watch.
it's I again, it's sort of, it all stems from that idea that like what we do as artists has value, and like the current market, it's not really a true market because it's basically controlled by three sort of major corporations, and this isn't like some conspiracy theory about these evil corporations or whatever. It's really actually sad because it's really just a failure of an industry to adapt to the internet and to change. Kind of like what we were talking about Napster. And even it's the reaction to Napster set us back 20 years, and Spotify is really just a reaction to piracy. Where basically, like, Spotify was competing with zero, so like of course it's going to pay nothing. You're weaning people off of piracy. So in truthfully, like on a consumer level, I mean, Spotify is an amazing experience. It's way better. The playlisting is great. Like,
Yeah.
I really don't, like, as a user, I really have not that many complaints. I think it's a great product, but sort of behind the scenes, and this is maybe more well known to people in the music industry, but Spotify specifically is owned by those three major corporations, and that's really the only reason that those corporations have so much sway. And this all happened in like 2016, 2017, but basically, those three labels, at the same time that they were negotiating a royalty rate for artists, were negotiating their own equity stake in Spotify pre-IPO. So, when the IPO came around, I mean, they made, hundreds of millions of dollars, and had basically zero incentive to up the royalty rate. So, there's a deep conflict of interest, and it's something that we're still dealing with today. So, and if you think about it, there's repercussions of that all like down the chain, because if you think about it, um, how do we value music catalogs today? It's a multiple of your royalty rate. So it's always going back to that one number that was decided not by a market, not by anybody, by two corporations essentially colluding. So it's sort of like, the whole thing that we're trying to do is like, no, music has more value. No, we are bigger than a $40 billion industry. Like there are blockchains with no users that are worth more than the music industry. uh, I'm not gonna name any names, but you know who they are. Uh, and for me, like, even if I realize this is more of an investment type of platform, but if you just take a step back and think about it, think about how pervasive music is in your life, how important it is to like the human experience. It's like it's everywhere. It's such a pivotal important part of people's lives. And you're telling me it's worth $40 billion. I mean, like something's wrong and
Something
something is
doesn't,
off.
yeah, the math is
It
off.
doesn't add up. And like, that's not me claiming that I'm worth more or whatever. It's just like, as an industry, the music industry has failed to adapt to the internet, just like a lot of other industries have. So the NFTs to me are, I don't know that we're there with a perfect model, but to me, it's ideologically the right path to fix that. It's basically sort of, um, it's embracing the internet. It's embracing the free flowing of information. The goal isn't to gatekeep content. So, that's sort of a common misconception with NFTs, is that we're trying to keep it behind a paywall or whatever. It's like you have to buy the NFT to listen to it. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. It's actually the opposite. What we want, like in my case, like I want my music to be free. I want everybody to enjoy it. I want literally everybody to enjoy it. But I want the ownership of that music to be scarce. So I can capture the value that I need as an individual through selling that ownership. And um meanwhile everybody else gets to enjoy it, because really that's what people want. People just want to enjoy the music.
Right.
And I think, well, I suspect that we're going to start to value music a lot higher, basically.
I can't wait to see that. Honestly, I've made a lot of friends through my NFT experience, and a lot of them are musicians and visual artists. And like I said at the beginning, seeing them start to capture the value of the art they create and the beauty of that through NFTs, to this whole new, embracing the power of the internet, has been really rewarding just as a friend. So I can't even imagine what it must be like for you guys on the inside to finally see that materialize. And it's been a long road, just going from your personal experience. And I think one of the big takeaways here is that it's still super early, so there's a lot of work left to do. So I guess just an open invite to anybody that's watching, that wants to get involved. I'm Sergito on Twitter. You can find Andre at, what's your Twitter handle?
Oh, just RAC. Yeah.
RAC. Please reach out, connect. We would love to kind of get to know everybody that's watching, and any good ideas, any questions, we're here for you guys. Andre, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Real Vision to talk about your career and music and NFTs and music NFTs. Any last words before we let you
Yeah.
go?
Well, first of all, it's crazy how quickly time flies when you're talking about this stuff. I kind of didn't realize we ran out the clock, but no, I think I just wanted to reiterate what you were saying, which was that, you know, there is a somewhat of a like anti NFT, backlash, and some people that maybe don't want to see this change, or feel like it's being captured by the wrong people or whatever. But I think it's important to remind people this is an open system, like by design. We want people to come in. Like, if you feel strongly that something isn't being done the right way, come in and build it. Like help us. Like, this is kind of the whole point. Like, this isn't us trying to capture everything. It's like, I think we can be much bigger as an industry if we work together. So I also second that invite, and come join us, like join the party.
Awesome. I do believe that human progress has been a consequence of collaboration, and so open invite to everybody. Join us, stay tuned. All the Real Vision content is great. And we're very happy to have had you here with us today. Andrew, again, thank you very, very much. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey there, visionaries. Your free membership to Real Vision Crypto, the world's premier source for cryptocurrency and digital asset analysis, is available right now at realvision.com/crypto.